very much. Thanks very much for the introduction, Amy. So yeah, the our first speaker is Anna. Anna Cagliari is a bioinformatician. She's previously worked as a data scientist in artificial intelligence consulting. Now she is a bioinformatics data scientist at a company called Mass Dynamics. Anna, take it away.
Thank you so much, Cameron, and also thank you so much to SSA Vic for the invite tonight. I'm just gonna share my screen, which I think I should be able to. Yeah, do you all see my screen, my slides? Awesome. So, well, I'm really glad to be here tonight. And as you probably expect, and as you probably can also see from my slides and my poor sketch, I'm going to bring you tonight to my journey. I mean, in the next 10 minutes, through my non-linear journey in the data science world. So to start, which I'm gonna be really brief with this one. So my first part, so I did from my bachelor until my PhD, I had training in statistics and bioinformatics, which if you don't know is pretty much the data science for biological data. So I did that between the University of Bologna, Glasgow, and Melbourne, and then this was all pretty great and awesome. And if you have any questions about it, feel free to ask me more later. But now, because tonight is the industry showcase, I'm going to tell you what happened towards the end of my PhD. So toward the end, I started more or less dreaming about a life where I didn't have to work every day or on weekends. I did really love my PhD, but I was also a little bit tired of the long hours in the lab or even at home just writing. And I was also becoming a little bit FOMO about what was going on in the data science space. So I thought that I was missing out a little bit on something, that there was something out there that I hadn't tried. And so I was here. It was just before COVID at the beginning of 2020, after my PhD, and I had to decide. I actually had already a postdoc in Europe. However, I had a little bit of a doubt if I wanted to go straight into it or try something different before. And so then here I am. I then decided to try something else. And as Cameron said, I joined the AI consulting company in Melbourne, Eliza, with 2I. So initially I had just postponed my postdoc, but then because COVID happened, because a lot of things happened, personal and not, I never left Melbourne, and I'm not still at Eliza now, but I never left them in industry space in the end. So for me, really moving to Eliza was pretty much a breath of fresh air. And it's not because I didn't like my time at WeHi, but of course, maybe after 8 years that I was in the same place, I really enjoy changing a little bit of tune. And it was not only because I met a lot of awesome people, but it was also because I think it's kind of good to know and to be able to work in a different style of work. So here it is a little bit of what I've learned, and I hope that you can find something useful, and maybe we can have more of a chat later. So from a purely technical point of view, I definitely learned Python on the job. As you probably would know, in industry in particular, probably because engineer and software developers really prefer Python compared to R, which is why I then had to learn it, and it was fun in the end. It wasn't like the worst thing ever, even though I'm still more of an R fan, if I have to be fair. I had a good exposure to machine learning in action, and I put here a link, which I'm happy to share a little bit later, or even I'm happy to talk to you about later. And I gave a talk, I gave a talk a few months ago at Monash about a similar project. So the link that I have here is a link to a client project that I had the luck to be part of when I was at ELISA. And basically the aim of a lot of the project that we had to do was to build software and models that were able to automatically extract data from printed documents. And yeah, I'm not going to discuss more details about the actual models, but if you're interested, I'm happy to share some other infos. The other thing that I really like about working at ELISA was that finally I didn't have to work by myself anymore. And it was probably the first time that I felt that I was really part of a team. So because a lot of our products were actually aiming to build software that actually worked in a client software ecosystem, for example, a bank like Westpac or a company like the NIB. So it's really important that you don't only have a good model, but you also have all the engineering sort of safe and sound structure around your model so that the model actually works well in the production setting of the client. And since I have been working so much with engineers, one other skills that are really picked up and that I really found, I mean, I think is still very useful in every other jobs that I'm doing, is all the DevOpsy side of the story. It might be that, I don't know how many people are, they know what DevOps is for, but for me it's really everything that is around building good software that works as you expect, that is well tested, that it can be deployed, and that is well checked, and that is well in place. So that is safe and works. And finally, one thing that I found quite interesting as well of working at ELISA was that it was quite interesting to see how the project are structured in a different way. So usually a project which goes for maybe 2-3 months, it was considered a little bit long, and therefore the work needed to be very planned from the very beginning. But also because clients pay you a lot of money, and therefore they really want to know what are your goals, your actions, the metrics. They want to know how you're going to succeed or not, what they are going to expect, which is not definitely something that I used to do when I was planning my research and I was trying to run my R models, but without really having a clear, always structured goals or metrics in mind. So all of this was really fun, and I learned a lot of things, and I had a lot of fun as well working in the team. However, I did realize more or less after a year that I was really missing the science. And while I didn't know that I was ready to go back to doing a postdoc, I then found another opportunities. And actually this is at the beginning of 2021, not 20. And then I decided to take it, which brings me now to where I am now. So since 4 months, I've joined the Melbourne-based startup, Mass Dynamics. And I would define my role as a bioinformatics data scientist. So I would say somewhere in between. I still have to do a lot of those DevOpsy production work that we do, because MD is a company which is a software based, which is based on a website. Therefore, everything is built in a software, and all the packages that we build, they have to work in the software basically. So to give you an idea what MD does, so the mission is pretty awesome. So Mass Dynamics is on a mission to free humanity and society from the burden of disease by helping more life scientists to transform proteomics data to knowledge better, faster, and easier. So all of this is really awesome, and I'm really stoked to be part now of a company that has such a mission. However, in more concrete terms, what I do every day is a little bit similar to what I was doing as well in the other company, which I work in a really fun team. There are scientists, there are software developers, there are people that do marketing. And because the company is fairly tiny, I have the chance to actually be across a lot of different sectors, which really makes me understand and see a little bit better how building a product actually works. However, I'm back to learn science. I've actually spent the past few months just really trying to learn the intricacy of mass spectrometry, which is the most used technique to quantify proteins in a sample. So it has been a steep learning curve, but I've been really loving being back into science. And again, as we were doing before, so we have to develop, we are developing software that life scientists can use for their work, and therefore we are developing again in R and Python. And finally, I'm really glad that the company takes really good care of trying. In the end, we will try to open source every science code that we write. We try to publish. We try to do all the good things that we can that we have in our power. Therefore, this is why for me I sit a little bit in between the work that I was doing before and the work that I would do if I was a full postdoc. So to conclude and to give a summary and maybe some dot points to bring home about what I've learned and what I maybe would do differently if I would go back. For me, definitely changing from a PhD, from academia to industry, and even the other industry helped me really to become more self-aware about what I actually enjoy. So I know now that I want to work in science, exactly what, maybe I haven't quite decided yet, but I really do want to work in science. Probably I wouldn't stress as much as I did to make the perfect choice about my future job right at the end of my PhD. Because for many of us, definitely, even as soon as you're out of uni, it's probably the first time that you don't have a 4, 5, 6 year plan. And it can be really daunting when you don't know. I mean, if you have a clear focus of what you want to do, that's awesome, go for it. If you don't, that's also fine to try something, and you'll probably be surprised that you're gonna be just fine. And I also learned actually by working outside of research to actually respect my free time. And I have my weekends back, everything is back. And I'm also happy to be surrounded by people that respect that time as well. And lastly, for me, what really helped me to find all of these different sort of to know what's out there and to know what I could do, it really helped me to talk and interact with people. And so for instance, the way in which I started working at ELISA was after I met some of our speakers at the Art Ladies Melbourne. So I really encourage you to come to events like this one, because you're going to meet people and you're going to know what you could potentially become or do. So finally, this is my last slide. For myself, I found a happy place in a non-linear path. I found that a spline turned out to be a good fit for me. So I really encourage you, don't be scared if you feel that you want to change something. You just need to probably find, I hope that every one of you will find the fit that fits best for you. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Anna. That was really interesting. And I love your comment about the end of being a spline, having spent the last couple of days messing around fitting splines to things. So if anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat. We're going to have a Q&A halfway through and then again at the end of the session. Now we're going to move on to Colith Chia, who is a lead data scientist at Bunnings. Colith has over a decade of experience in statistics and data science in a lot of different industries. Love to hear from you. Away you go, Colith.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Well, I'll start by saying it's good to see people that I've worked with on the, I'm just looking at the participant list. So, you know who you are, and hi to you. I am a data scientist lead at Bunnings. I think a bit like Anna, I've made the transition from a more sort of research environment, working with scientists and all that, to, and yes, sorry, I didn't have a slide deck, so I just talked. From a more research environment to the industry. And it's interesting to see the different world as well. There are things that are more important in one world that's not important in the other, and vice versa. And depending on this kind of difference, it actually has impact or implication on your, I guess, the statistical methodology that you choose. If in one world, say, precision is not needed in certain circumstances, then there's no point going for these very advanced, complex statistical methods at the expense of other things, computational costs or whatever. On the other hand, if that's needed, then you need to find some other way. So depending on what the priority is in that kind of field, in that kind of work, it actually has implication on what you do. That's not what I intend to talk about tonight. I just want to start by giving, as a way to set the context, sort of my view of what a data scientist in industry is. Just to set the scene a bit. So my view is always changing. So, if you asked me 3 months ago, you might have heard a different answer, and 3 months later, it might be different again. So I'll just tell you what I think currently. To solve a problem in life, there are usually many ways. Some might, well, actually, let's narrow it down. Say to solve a problem in an organization, there are usually many ways. If you give it to the marketing department, they'll use marketing, right? So that's like by influencing people's, perception or emotion or psychology to achieve what you want to achieve. If you give it to a legal department, they will try to put policies and laws to try to control that kind of outcome. If you give it to IT, they might, build an IT solution, engineer a platform, build a robot or whatever to solve that problem. If you give it to a data scientist, that person, the data scientist, would be using data tricks essentially to try to solve that problem. And so that's what a data scientist is. It's someone that's a bag of tricks to draw from to solve a particular problem. So that bag of tricks, I call it data science. So I've just made the distinction between data scientist and data science. Data scientist is a person, and their primary existence is not to do data science, but to solve a particular problem or achieve a particular business outcome. And the bag of tricks is what I call data science. So with that said, I will just share, not a slide deck, but I've just sort of quickly put down some of the bag of tricks that just I've done just in the last couple of years at Bunnings alone. And again, I'm not the only data scientist at Bunnings. If you were to ask all the other people, the list would go on as well. So all this is what I call a bag of tricks. It could be something very statistical, say the experiment stuff as well. I also see Jess is on the list as well. Just a couple of weeks ago, I sent Jess an email asking her about the StatWedge trials, stuff that I've learned from the conference. So that's on one hand, very statistical, all the way to something, say you see text or image as well, working on image. So I don't know if stats course start teaching people image as well. I hope they do, but how to handle image and all that. So something very more sort of machine learning type thing, to something more, say, optimization. And by that, I mean things like, integer programming, that sort of stuff. So it's very wide. And all this to me is just a bag of tricks for me to use to solve that final outcome that I want to do. And now I'll just say that, so like I'm a statistician, like I'm an A-stat, but I'll just claim that this list is wider than statistics. So data science is wider than statistics. I know this is not the view that everyone, particularly people from Discord, will share, but that's my view. I will also say that this list is wider than machine learning. So sometimes when I talk to people from industry, they tend to confuse or equate data science with machine learning a lot. So that's not the case. We've just finished recruiting, several, data analysts and data scientists. And in the interview, we usually ask them, hey, show us what you do. A lot of them just go straight to showing us, their most fancy, whatever machine learning thing. So that to me is like, yeah, it's good that you can do that, but that is just like this one little thing in your bag of tricks, which, I don't even care that much. I mostly care about how you solve the problem, how you approach that. So just to show sort of the difference between data science and statistics on one hand and machine learning on the other hand. But again, back to what a data scientist does is someone who solves problem using whatever data tricks that they have.
Sorry to interrupt, Cole. Are you intending to be sharing slides? Because we can't see any.
Okay. Not a slide, but I was just sharing my screen. Let me try that again. I know why. I'm showing the wrong screen. That's what happens when I have too many screens.
Okay, that's much better. Sorry,
Are you-
sorry, Colin.
Actually, I'm not even sure which screen I'm showing now. What can you see a Word document with dot points? Very good. So that's the screen that I was talking to. Just showcasing the different bag of tricks that I was using to do data science, which is to solve a problem. How much time do I have left? Can someone tell me? Cool. I can't hear, but I assume it's not much. I just want to make another point, and I'm happy to talk about that whole list or my view later on as well. Just one other point I want to make, especially to this audience, which is this formula here, which is really an analogy rather than an actual method I want to go into. I'm sure we're all familiar with this formula. It's like this binomial thing, probability of at least one success. So, if n trials, independent trials, each success rate is p, what's the probability that you get at least one success in n trials? The analogy I want to make is that if you're applying for a job, whether this is your first job out of uni or you're trying to break into a particular field, maybe transitioning from science to industry or just getting into a particular field, that's your chance of getting the job if you apply to any job. Standard advice or conventional wisdom will tell you that you should increase your P. So, research the company, write better CV, write better resume, prep for interview questions, or just upskill yourself. So that is true. That is what you should focus on first. But what I want just to point out is that at some point, increasing your P is going to give you diminishing return. So you really should just increase your N. So brute force it, just apply and apply and apply. The reason I'm saying that is that over the past few years at Bunnings, we've recruited, we've had many rounds of recruitment. I just don't see people from statistics background applying at all. I just don't know why that is the case. Is it a self-confidence? Is it a perception issue? Is it a miscommunication? Or people are just not monitoring that kind of job ad? I don't know what the reason is, but it's very sad from my point of view to not see stats people applying for jobs. So my point is just that if you're trying to break into the field or do whatever, just increase your N by just keep applying. There's some internet research flying around. I don't know how true it is, right? I think they're talking about what's the stats like a male will apply for a job if they're 60% meeting the 60% of criteria. Female will need to if they're 100%. To me, both 60% and 100% is way too high for you to apply for a job. I think if you job that has 10 dot points, you have 3 or 4 of them, that's good enough for you to apply. Doesn't mean you will get the job, of course, but just to apply, you shouldn't self-screen yourself out from that process. That's all I want to share.
All right, thanks. Thanks very much, Colin. If anyone has questions for Colin, then again, we welcome you to put them in the chat. And the way, sorry, I can see Anna has started answering the questions in the chat. We're going to have a Q&A period after Belinda speaks next, where Anna, Colin, and Belinda will be able to spend some time answering questions interactively with the audience. So next up, we have Belinda Ma, who is currently a senior public transport planner at Public Transport Victoria. Belinda has been doing cool public transport data stuff for a long time now. I'll hand it over to you, Belinda.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Wow, the first 2 talks were kind of very different from how I expected. So mine's more like all of the stuff that I've done because I've been working for 20 years. So I've done a lot of stuff that isn't statistics, but I have done study in statistics, and statistics is really important to what I do, even though other people don't think it is. So I started out 20 years ago with a science degree with a psychology major where I did study stats, but I also did things like genetics and yeah, I really enjoyed the sort of science side of things. I tried to do postgrad. I did a year of software development at RMIT, and it was just too dry. We were learning C, and you had to code on paper in the exams, and I could not code on paper to save my life. So I dropped out, and I worked in accounts for about a decade. And so I sort of started out in data entry, and because I've always been a numbers person, obviously, and I moved up into sort of reconciliation and data analyst roles. I've lived in New Zealand for 3 years, working for the railways there on a really massive project, well, massive by New Zealand standards anyway, electrifying the trains in Auckland. So those trains were diesel, and you know, they needed a lot more extra tracks where there were single track sections and new trains. And so yeah, I definitely recommend working for a large project at one point, because you can go back and see what you've done. And I went back a couple of years ago to Auckland, and I cried in like the equivalent of Flinders Street Station with my trains running, and yeah, it was great. Wellington was far too small for me, and so I came back to Melbourne. I was very homesick, and one of the more interesting jobs I did before I went back to study again was a milk trading analyst. So I worked for a company called Lion Dairy and Drinks. So they do pure milk and sheer cheese. So they have like really massive milk factories, and I was looking after Sydney, and I was reconciling like the milk being picked up from the farmers and going into the factories, and then like every batch of milk is tested for fat and protein content and bacteria levels as well. And you sort of had to look at those results and say, oh, that doesn't look right, I'll have to fix that number. And so that was all done very manually. I really hope they've automated it now. Let me see. So then I went back to uni and I didn't really think I was going to get anywhere in accounts without study in it, and accounting's boring. So I did a grad dip in stats and operations research at RMIT. And like I took 18 months off, and it was hard, but it was really interesting, and did operations research in that, which was really fascinating, and was exposed to the language Julia and R, which I hated at first. So when I finished that, I worked for the Bureau of Stats for 6 months, cleansing data for one of their surveys. That's not my cup of tea either. And then I got my dream job in Public Transport Victoria, looking at the lateness and cancellation stats for trams, trains and buses all over Victoria. So yeah, you can tell by the background of my spare room that I'm rather fond of trains. That was only a 1-year contract, unfortunately, but like that really, like people have asked me in the past, like, how do you get the skills that you need, jobs are being advertised saying you need this, this and this. Find a job where you're given the time to learn them. That's how I've done it. So at PTV, I was able to learn SQL and pulling data out of databases using R, and then visualizing it and doing some statistical analysis, which nobody in that area, because it's kind of an area of data engineers, like going back a little bit to the point that Colette was making about sort of data scientists and, not actually understanding the data. Like it was, there's so much data that people don't understand because they don't know anything about statistics. And like I think it's really important to go out there and make people understand if you can before they kind of slam the door in your face. But yeah. So then I had a 1-year contract at Swinburne where I was forecasting student numbers in courses, so in operations, and there I learnt data viz in Tableau. I was doing more complicated SQL queries and learning Matillion, which is an ETL, to do sort of bigger data sort of calculations in the background. So one of the big things of that job was kind of translating data for non-data people, and doing visualizations that they're going to understand. and I did a particular project on looking at the number of offers that you would make to VTAC students to get the right number of people in your course after census date, because you've got a few different levels of attrition there from people not accepting the offer or dropping out before census date. That was really interesting, but very stressful because it was over Christmas and time sensitive. So that was a one-year contract as well. And finally, I got into a permanent job that I'm, well, relatively happy with. So I got a job at the Department of Transport, which PTV is now a part of. So I work in, my role was in strategic planning, but I've now got a promotion into tram and bus planning. So what strategic planning do is look at, and like there's so much fascinating data out there, what they use is the Victorian Integrated Transport Model, which is an estimation of, okay, in the future we expect people to be living here, here and here, and working here, here and here. And therefore, if we look at the origins and destinations of people doing travel to work, we would expect, you know, this road to be really busy, and, you know, we need more buses here and we need to build a train line here. And so strategic planning is very big picture. Through there, I managed to get time to do some work on a project that I talk about in Melbourne, our user group talk, which is on YouTube, about looking at, like, something I'm really passionate about is like looking at the predicted travel time with driving compared to public transport. So pulling that data from thousands of locations and being able to show, okay, the person who lives here has this choice, a 40-minute public transport trip or a 10-minute drive. Are they going to take the public transport trip if they have a choice? Probably not. So we need to improve those options for people so that they will shift from driving to public transport. In tram and bus planning, I look at things like, an offshoot of the tracking that we do in order to see whether the trams, buses and trains are running to the timetable is that we have the location of every vehicle every 6 seconds over the entire state pretty much. And so you can look at that in more detail and say, well, this tram, you know, trams at this particular time tend to be waiting at this traffic light. Are they doing that because a lot of people are getting on at that stop, or are they behind a whole lot of backed up traffic, or is the traffic light just not giving them priority, and we need to give priority at that signal to get the public transport vehicles moving? So yeah, there's a lot of really fascinating data out there, and really interesting things you can do with graphs of the network and timetable data. And I look at a bit of runtime analysis in my job as well. So yeah, that's me.
All right. Thanks very much, Belinda. So I think we've got about 10 minutes for questions for Anna, Cole, and Belinda. So please put them in the chat, and I'll read them out, and then the presenters will be able to answer. I know Anna's already answered some in chat, but it'd be great to hear it for everyone. So Emmy asks Anna, would you recommend recent graduates to work for startups or to go for a well-established company first?
Yeah, so I mean, exactly. I did write my answer, but I have to say that I think it depends a lot on the person. So as I wrote there, probably if you go to a startup, you will be working in a very, very small team. Therefore, you might not have as much support in your field. You might be the only stats person that is there, and so you just by yourself. It's definitely really good and challenging because you have to learn a lot, and you are the one who is responsible for everyone, but it can also be daunting, and you might be working in Swell, maybe in other places where you can have more support initially, maybe find a mentor and then grow from there. Having said that, though, depends on the person. You might already be super, confident, and you just want to go for it. That's awesome. And
I
said,
definitely wouldn't recommend being the only data person, because I've been the
Yeah.
only data person for a long time and I'm over it.
yeah, okay. So you see,
Yeah, but that's me.
exactly. So you definitely, probably, I've never worked in a very, very big company, so I don't know what to answer about that. Maybe you, Belinda, can say how it is instead.
Oh, I think like in state government, I mean, I don't know about other departments, but you can have a lot of siloing of areas. So even though there are other areas that look at data, they might not be, well, but the people I would like to talk to are all introverted, and so they're not gonna talk to me. So.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the company itself would make a difference from what I'm hearing. But being the only data scientist is very different from working in an artificial intelligence startup, for example. Would that be a fair assessment of what you've both said?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, being the only data scientist in a artificial intelligence startup is different.
Because there'd be sort of more technical people, like, whereas I need to deal with non-technical people all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I always had next to me, and engineers, but sometimes they also speak a very different language, and so you realize soon that even software engineers, you need to explain, even though they're technical, they're not on the same level.
Yeah, it's a different type of technical.
Medium size, so you get a little bit of worth. Yeah.
So for Anna, we also have a more technical question from Mina Wang. For using R and Python together in a project, what IDE do you recommend? And what were the biggest challenges in combining the two languages in production?
Good question. I struggle. So regarding the first one, for R, I mainly use RStudio. Well, I only use RStudio, which is fantastic and it works very well. For Python, yeah, you can go, I don't know, VS Code, PyCharms are the ones that I see more commonly. I got used to PyCharm, and so I stick to that one at the moment. Regarding to the other question, R in production can be tricky. I've actually, thanks to attending the user, I managed to figure out what to do a little bit better, because when I first joined the startup, I was the second data person there, second and a half, but R, as I was telling in my talk, software engineers don't really interact well with R, and it was really hard to just understand what to do. So I felt like I was alone in understanding what's the best practice there. And so I think we nailed a little bit. At the moment, we are using RM and Docker. So that's sort of like our way, our flow. We haven't quite perfectionated yet, but it's there. And for Python, similarly, Python, the engineers normally can deal with that way better, but it's kind of similar. They use maybe Conda and Docker, and it sort of like works pretty well for them. And then there's all the, I mean, I could probably talk more to you, but.
So I have I have a question from me this time relating to that. So do you think that for someone who might be interested in working in industry, learning things like Docker and Python and so on are worthwhile?
Well, it will definitely add to your set of skills. So I learned them on the job, but if you go there already, it will make your life easier. They are pretty broad. Maybe knowing a little bit, version control, Docker would definitely really help.
Great.
Yeah, I agree.
Version control changed my life, and I don't even code with people. I definitely learn version control. It's so good.
Yeah. So I have a question for Colif from Emmy. Colif, you said that not many statisticians apply to data science jobs, but do people apply from other areas like business analytics, operational research, and econometrics that you'd consider part of statistics?
So in terms of background qualifications, I see a lot of people from engineering background, computer science background. Recently, we see people from sort of newer type degrees, like Master of Analytics, Master of Data Science, also applying as well. So we see a lot of this type of background. Not statistics, not even econometrics or what are some other things. Not the
Operational
more
research or,
yeah, no.
Cameron, if you don't mind an early jump in from me.
Yeah, sure.
The reason I hear this a lot, that people with great statistics backgrounds or econometrics or what have you find it really difficult to get through the application process. Sometimes they are being, not getting picked for interviews when really they should be. And often in my experience, that might be somebody earlier down the chain who has nothing to do with actually executing data science, but they've been given a series of keywords and skills and don't have the context to say, oh, this person, this has actually happened to me. I have a PhD in econometrics. Do you reckon I could handle time series machine learning algorithms? Yeah, I'm probably going to be okay. I once got knocked back for a job for being too econometric-y when they were after somebody that could do causal analysis. So sometimes it's just that they're not being marketed correctly. And happy to go into detail later, but there are some ways to get around that and have these really amazing skill sets that are very, very applicable to these fields.
I would love to hear that later on when we open up for a general panel discussion. And actually, so I'm working at a university now, but a while ago, I applied and interviewed with a small data science consulting firm. And after that interview, I actually got feedback from one of the people on the interview panel that said, you seem totally qualified and a great person, but you seemed too into science and not enough into business, which is, let's be honest, that's a correct description of me. But obviously, I didn't sell myself correctly.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're ready to go on to our second half of speakers now. And thanks so much, Steph, for your input there. Kevin, I'll hand over to you to chair the second half of our event.
Thanks, Cameron. Don't worry, I got exactly the same feedback couple of months back for some of the jobs I applied to. So next up, we have Denzel. Denzel is currently a senior analyst in model risk management at Macquarie Bank. Personally met Denzel when he was an honor student in statistics back in the University of Sydney. It has been a few years since I caught up with him, so I'm really excited and interested to hear what he has to say. So Denzel, if you're ready, please take it away.
Sure thing. Good evening, everyone, and thanks, Kevin, for the introduction. It has been a little while since we've caught up, but hopefully I can share something that is new to you. So it's an honour to be here with our other panelists, with varied experiences, and I hope I can share some insights into how I use statistics in the financial services industry. I admit that my thesis on the agricultural applications of robust linear mixed models gave me little clue on what to expect on my first day. So following the completion of 2019 graduate program and have been with them for 2.5 years now. So tonight I'll be covering what my day job entails, how university has helped me get to where I am today, and a reflection on my journey thus far. So you might be wondering, after Kevin mentioned model risk management. So what is model risk and how do I use statistics in managing model risk? So we at Macquarie define model risk to be the loss arising from the use of misspecified models. Now, the models that we review are used for valuation of any sort. Could be for general risk management or for capital quantification, which the government tends to have quite a keen interest in. Now, the model risk management team, the team that I sit in, is responsible for reviewing models, generally ensuring 3 key items. So number one is that the assumptions are sound and appropriate to the data. Now, as I'm sure you can all appreciate, there are often concessions based on the limitations of the data available. And this is particularly a sore point actually for Macquarie as sort of a younger retail bank, is that we don't have the masses of data that a more mature bank such as Westpac or CBA has. Secondly, the modelling approach has been correctly specified and correctly implemented. So the complexity of the modelling approach can vary significantly based on the business need. Now, we come across deterministic models, such as the discounted cash flow model, or statistical models, varying from simple linear models to survival models, sometimes time series models, or anything in between. And further, the implementation can vary depending on who our internal clients are. So some like to use Excel, which makes it a lot easier. Others are, some Python, and some even C++. And we are generally expected to review whatever models come our way. So this tends to lead to some very rapid upskilling. And thirdly, that the model purpose aligns with regulatory requirements. So this one also depends on who our internal clients are. My specific team generally looks after models that sit in the retail banking arm of Macquarie Group, which means there is plenty of attention from regulatory bodies. Now, as we face scrutiny from regulators and government bodies around the world, we must maintain high standards to ensure we can continue to operate with the licenses they have given us. One wrong move and we can be financially penalised, either by fines or by restricting our activity in a particular jurisdiction. Now, one of the projects I'm working on is seeking to estimate the conditional loss given a particular event. Now, there are two components that multiply to give this conditional loss, meaning two separate models and hence two sources of error, and I'm tasked with reviewing the model developer's approach. Now, an interesting conundrum that we're facing is that calculating a suitable confidence interval for this conditional loss, being the product of two models, is not straightforward, unless perhaps by the dreaded delta method. And we suspect the model developer doesn't know how to do it themselves, which makes it a little bit more fun. Now, something I find fascinating with my role is that there is quite a lot of variety. So the statistics can be precise, it could be as simple as just, throwing the textbook at it, or it might be needing further research, which sort of gives a bit of excitement for those people that have got the research backgrounds to want to, explore more about how we can appropriately review something. In other cases, such as another project that I'm working on, it requires knowledge of stochastic calculus, which I find keeps me on my toes. It completely variety sort of keeps me going. Now, another aspect of my day job are the extracurricular activities on offer. So I guess sort of leaning on to the discussion from earlier about, what could be the differences between a smaller startup versus a larger corporate firm. We have a lot of opportunities for volunteering, depending on your interest. So for me, one of my major volunteering activities at the moment is working with the Macquarie Group Foundation to help the Monash University through their World Mosquito Program in their communications and engagement endeavours. Now, on another front, not sure if anyone has heard of Toastmasters before. They are a not-for-profit training organisation that focuses on communication and leadership development. The Macquarie Group has a Toastmasters club, of which I help coordinate. Now, you might be wondering, how has university helped me get to where I am? Now, of course, the statistical skills and knowledge from my degree are invaluable to my role, particularly the course content in my honours year. Now, I also majored in financial mathematics, hence my interest in stochastic calculus. But I would also add that doing extracurricular activities has helped me quite a bit in my role. As I'm sure Emmy, who was one of my honours supervisors, can attest to, I spent quite a bit of time outside the classroom volunteering. Now, the ability to easily talk to others and communicate my ideas with clarity have proven essential to my role. I consider these interpersonal skills, or the soft skills, as some see it, to be crucial for the financial services industry. In summary, my biggest takeaways from university are the knowledge and skills learned, the desire to continue to learn, and the ability to research, and the ability to pick up things quickly. We statisticians tend to be a pretty clever bunch. If your background, as Steph said before, coming from econometrics, doesn't necessarily mean you can't do stuff that a statistics person can do. And so it's pretty easy for us, learn new things on the fly. Now time to reflect on my experience so far. What have I learned or not learned? Now, an anecdote that I enjoy recounting to new starters in my team was my parents' naivety in R when I first joined Macquarie and how I was taught to do things differently. Now, I came to my first job, reasonably confident with my skills in R, in particular with Tidyverse, perhaps lacking on the apply front. But one of my colleagues, taking one look at my screen, sat me down and sternly spoke to me about the flaws of Tidyverse. Not ggplot though, they love ggplot, but the rest of it didn't want a bar of it. So I thought to myself, hold on, what else is out there? Like surely Tidyverse or perhaps BaseR at worst is all that's out there. But no, Dartatable was the solution to his problem. So this colleague was and still is the biggest proponent of Dartatable I have ever come across. Now there was so much to learn, to be proficient at it, of course, and it challenged me, given that its syntax couldn't be more different from Tidyverse. 2 years later, I'm still learning, and it is definitely an incredibly efficient tool when working with larger data sets. And you wouldn't believe it, now I'm one of their disciples advocating for Dartatable to anyone that will listen to me. Now, the next reflection, what have I achieved? So some of my key achievements have been around what value I can add to a model review, whether it be correcting someone's probability calculation, actually similar to one that Colette was showing about the likelihood of getting a job, resulting in higher estimated profit for this particular project, or performing simulations to unearth unintuitive relationships between model variables that not even the model developer was aware of. The next reflection, what surprised me? I admit that I wasn't sure how statistics would be used, let alone appreciated, in financial services. So to be able to see how much value it adds to projects has really been great to see, especially for someone who has always been interested to see how statistics can be applied in the real world. Now, finally, this is a particular question that Kevin asked me. So how has COVID affected my job and career? Now, COVID has certainly disrupted how my industry operates. From being one that traditionally mandates maximum face time, we are transforming to one that accepts a more hybrid style of working. In particular, Macquarie has empowered me to work remotely, really remotely. I speak to you now from Mudgee in regional New South Wales, which is about 3.5 hours outside of Sydney CBD. Now, I don't see COVID as something that has negatively affected my career. It really has created an opportunity for all of us to see how we embrace the change. For me in my industry, I see so many benefits to COVID, whether it's better work-life balance through more employee-led flexibility in their hours, or even walking meetings. I was hitting 10,000 steps a day while working. It's been pretty hectic, and it's all a matter really of how we respond to the change. So in closing, none of my career journey thus far would have been possible without statistics. I'm grateful for the path that I'm on, and I thoroughly enjoy the work that I do and how it continues to keep me challenged. But you might wonder, do I see myself doing statistics long-term or seeing myself in this industry long-term? I certainly see myself staying in the industry, but as to the role of statistics, I believe it will always be there in some shape or form, whether I'm the one perhaps reviewing or building the models. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Denzel. That was very, very interesting to hear all you up to now. Again, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. I can obviously see some conversation going on. That was great. Next up, we have Steph Stemmel. So I first met Steph back in Sydney when she was a manager at PwC, but her career stretches further back than that. I think she worked as a consultant for the World Bank at some stage, and that she have taken roles at both government as well as universities as well as private industries. Today, Steph is working as a principal econometrician
Yep.
At a company called Transurban, and we'll hear from Steph now. Thank you.
Excellent. So currently I'm Principal Econometrician in Australia at Transurban, and you might have heard of our company in the AFR and on the news the last couple of days, as we just made a big acquisition in the form of some roadways here in Sydney. So that's been a very big thing in our world at the moment. But if I'm going to talk about my career, I think we could give it one particular subtitle, and that's I never meant to be here. And that goes all the way back. If I look at any 5 years of my career, I would not have predicted where I ended up next. And these wild irregularities in what I've been doing and what I've been planning have left me with a key set of skills that will hopefully benefit others as well. But in order to give some context to that, I might give you the full rundown. The details of this is something I talk about in a talk that I do called Tales from Far Off Places, which describes some of the things that I learned early on in my journey from an academic all the way through to what I do today. So way back, sometime last century, young Steph left school jubilant in the fact that she would never do mathematics again. Because gosh, it's just awful. Like, who would want to make a career out of that? Good God. So I spent my early uni career avoiding it. Eventually it came up to slap me in the face. And I was doing a couple of courses at a time, you know, one first year, one second year. If you hate it, why make it easy on yourself? And the light bulb went off. It finally got hard enough to be interesting once they took the numbers away. Turns out I really like math. I just hate numbers. And let me tell you, that's led me to some interesting places in this career. So I ended up doing a PhD in theoretical econometrics. And what that means is that I can derive the Dickey-Fuller distribution, or just about any other non-standard asymptotic time series distribution, just like that. That's what I was doing. And one of the reasons I was doing that is because I didn't like data or numbers. I don't know if you've ever heard, but this real data stuff, it's awful. Like, who would want to be dealing with that? So, you know, what would become a traditional twist in my career, my first job out of grad school was working on survey data with the World Bank from Papua New Guinea on children ages 7 to 9 years old. These kids were speaking, you know, at least 4 different languages, a lot of them. So the surveys themselves were conducted in 2 different languages, at least. Data doesn't get more real or more wild or more messy than that. So that was what I like to think of as my second learning stage on how to be a professional. And let me tell you, I have never seen something that's statistically correct since then. And I don't anticipate that I ever will again. So I spent some years at the World Bank looking at development data, particularly in education all across Asia Pac. So I was working on projects for Myanmar, for Laos, Tonga, Vanuatu, Samoa, lots of different places. And that was amazing. I was still officially an econometrician back then. And then I switched over to consulting, firstly independently, and then later on some other things, some general type, you know, business consulting. And maybe this rings true for a few people in the room. Turns out I wasn't technical enough for a lot of places. And, you know, this machine learning stuff, I didn't have experience in machine learning, not enough anyway. And so I kept facing barriers like this, you know, for some time in my career. And it was really, really hard to break through that. Now, just to stop for a second, is this some of the other experiences that people are having coming out of statistics or econometrics? You know, being told that you don't have the experience to take on a data science job, or you haven't learned the right technical skills? I don't know, does everybody know how to use the Zoom things? Yeah, this has happened to y'all? Okay, this is a real thing. And part of that is that, you know, our field is intensely dominated by the computer science and computer engineering fraternities. That's not a bad thing, right? They are really good at what they do. I had to tell a data engineer today that, hey, Joey, I just write magic spells that make the magic box that do what I want it to do, but it's not going fast enough. Now, sure, I was joking, I'm a bit better than the magic spells, but don't ask me to, you know, stand up your Spark cluster. That's not my wheelhouse, and that's okay. I still deliver a lot of value for the company that other people might not necessarily be able to do. And so what I learned from that is that these knockbacks and these rejections, they're not about me and they're not about you. They're not about your skill set or your potential or your ability to deliver value. It's about somebody on the other end who may not actually be technical at all, having been told to look for a very specific set of skills and a very specific set of names for those skills. And all that's happening here is that they can't see your potential because they don't have that context. So to get past that, the best way is to find somebody who will see your potential. And that means having a network. So a bit more on that later. So I spend a lot of time as an indie data science consultant because being an independent statistics consultant, well, the difference there for me was about 20 cents in the dollar. So if people say, you know, what's the difference between data science and statistics? I'd say, well, it depends on what area you practice in, right? So I'm not a production machine learning engineer. Could I do it? Sure. Do I want to? No. It's not where I really play best. Okay, I'm pretty good economist these days. I'm great with business problems. I solve bespoke issues and build and design solutions that will often be a strings of multiple different things. So for me, SageMaker is not a great tool. Doesn't mean it's not an awesome tool, but it's not the right one for me. I'm building things, you know, bespoke and getting my team to do the same. Now, Transurban plays in a similar place to where Belinda's work sits. She works in public transport. I work in a road company, and we're interested in all sorts of things. We're interested in what will happen in the next half hour and how we manage that. We're also interested in what Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, and certain parts of North America look like in the next 40 to 50 years. Who's going to live there? Why are they living there? What jobs do they do? How do they interact with the city around them? Autonomous vehicles. That's interesting. There's a whole bunch of things around that, and that's where I play really well, and my team does, because we're really interested in why and what the behavior is. And it's not just about minimizing a score, some sort of value, RMSE, MAPE, whatever it is you want. That doesn't make that those sorts of models are bad. It's not. As we've heard from all of the other speakers, it's about context. And in my context right now, I'm really interested in unpacking behaviors, which makes statistical and econometric rigor really, really important. So I was at PwC for a few years where I learned the art of talking to people in a language that they understand. I also do pretty good PowerPoint decks compared to what I used to do, but I will never ever walk away from the box and the arrow system because that just does it for me for explaining people. But just pro tip, box with something in it, arrow, other box, picture of cogwheels, box, arrow, happy face. That can say a lot if you have to make it that way. So what do you need to survive a wildly unexpected career like mine? So I now sit on the senior leadership team of Traffic, which is a function under strategy at Transurban. We're an ASX 20 company. Okay, we have one of the biggest market caps in the country. And all of you that have super may very well own a part of us. Now we're a big company, we think about what we do a lot. So how do I end up from there, from theoretical econometrics, with a side at the World Bank and all the rest of it? And how does that all build to a career? Because at the outset, none of it looks remotely related. Okay, so there's a few different things, and my 3 top tips for this is a growth mindset. Okay, I have never walked into a job knowing what I was doing. And that's not to say I didn't have amazing skills. When I walked into this one, principal econometrician is probably the one role I've had that most neatly encapsulates what I did as a grad student. Prior to this job, my PhD had been directly useful approximately twice in the intervening 12 years. Okay, this is the only one. So a growth mindset's been really, really important to me. Right now at Transurban, I'm learning about transport. Belinda, you've been working in transport for like 20 years, right? A lot longer than me.
Not quite.
A lot longer than me, anyway. So I don't know anything about transport. I've been at Transurban for a year. You know, roads and transport and thinking about cities in really, really dynamic and complex ways, not my fundamental wheelhouse. But that's okay because I'm learning. PwC for me was a huge move, right? All of a sudden, I was in the center of capitalism. And that's what I used to refer to as my the partner that I worked for. Oh, you capitalists. You know, I'm converting to capitalism, right? We also used to refer to it as a benign despotism. Always work for people with a sense of humor. Life is too short. And so I had to learn all about that. I had to communicate in ways that other people could understand me really well. At the World Bank, I had to learn with actual real data and what the hell to do with that. And I also had to learn how to work with data and work with people in a way that respects where that data comes from, right? Because if I'm in there and I'm talking to the data and I'm doing things to the data that sends a message to the stakeholder, you don't belong here. This is me sitting in Sydney behind my desk. I will make the decisions for all of us because I know best. How do you think that's going to play? What do you think that's doing to somebody in another country who is lifting a lot heavier load and is a hell of a lot smarter than I am and creating a lot more value with a lot less, right? So if I really want to be collaborative and if I really want to make a difference, then I have to meet people in ways that allow them to bring what they have to the table. Never be the smartest person in the room. Okay, I've been consistently the best stats person in the room since I started. I have been the lone wolf statistician for a very long time, econometrician, whatever. I'll answer to anything at this point, but never be the smartest person in the room. Make sure there are other people there that you're learning from, and we'll call you on your, am I allowed to swear, Kevin? I've been very, very well behaved up until this point, but who will call you on items that require you to be called on. My next tip is your skills grow with you. Okay, we talk about R, we talk about Python, Docker, whatever. My first real coding language was Fortran. Good old Fortran, was it 96? God rest its soul. It had goto, right? So you just like go to line 247 and start executing from there. Go to line 1004 if you haven't. God, that thing was awful. My other first language was Gauss. And if you can spend 5 years of programming in that piece of crap, you can do anything. So it's more about the skills and the particular language and platforms that you're using. And the need for those skills change over time. Any one of you could complete the research and projects that I did in my PhD over 4 years in 3 months, because the world is really different now. And open source is a thing, and we can share about that, and our ability to collaborate is so much better. So you need a different set of skills, right? You need to be able to collaborate with other people. Maybe that's version control, and maybe it's a bunch of other things. But we're no longer trepidatiously reading through email listservs, too terrified to ask a question. The world has changed for the better in a lot of ways. But it's not just software, and it's not just about models. It's about, business understanding. That's one that keeps coming back again and again and again for anybody who's thinking about a job outside academia. And that can mean one of two things. It can mean you're not really our kind of person, and we're worried that we won't understand you and that we don't know how to manage you. That's a big one. The other one is, business understanding is actually a key set of skills. And so we should be talking about what it is. I personally find this idea that people coming out of academia are difficult to manage or don't do well in business is a complete piece of crap. You take a group of people who have self-selected into a highly specific process and developed a highly specific set of skills and have shown that they are extremely intelligent, independent, and able to learn. And then we tell them, yeah, I don't know, you're not really getting the vibe of the thing. That's not hard to manage, that's being badly managed. Okay, so there are people out here who want to manage your skills and are happy to work with you and who recognize what it is that you are bringing to the table. Now, whether or not you've got a PhD or a third year of honours student in econometrics, like there are people out here that can see your potential. So again, people that see your potential, that know that currently, just to pick somebody at random, Cameron, you may not be able to price bonds just at this moment, but it turns out
Correct.
you're probably pretty okay at math though, and could work it out. Yeah, and especially if I showed you how to do it, and maybe you're not the world's greatest PowerPoint slide designer.
Definitely true.
Yeah, but you know why I can do it now? Because there's this director at PwC who's put a lot of time into letting me do it badly, and then correcting it, and then going back again so that I could learn how to do a skill that I didn't know how to do yet until I got there. And it sounds like the most lame thing ever, but it's actually a really fundamental communication skill. And so somebody saw the potential in me. Kevin, I think I need to be quiet now, don't I?
Yep, that's what I'm trying to do. It's the high signaling. So good. I appreciate the chat. Yes, I definitely appreciate that. Thank you. We'll try to move it on, and once we have a little bit more time towards the end, we can start asking questions and just continue that conversations. Because I know through my personal experience, as well as hearing from many other people, that rejection in this area is quite often. So
and I've actually
definitely like to hear that from someone more senior like yourself. So next up, we have Steve Bush. So Steve also had a career that spans across academia and industries. And I met Steve back in 2019 for a career event organized by the New South Wales branch of Stat Society. When meeting people in person was still a thing. But anyway, at the time, Steve was a senior manager for experimentation at the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. He's currently the principal optimization analyst at Seek. So take it away, Steve.
Thanks. Yeah, I've brought a slide deck along with me. I kind of want to start on the dealing with rejection because I think it's a good one. I think sometimes it's even a case where someone has actually identified that, you know, the whole fit. There is that sort of rubbish, that corporate rubbish, that you just know this person's going to not necessarily, like it's something that you want to save them from, and it's kind of a red flag for the company itself sometimes. So sometimes it's a case of not all rejection is bad. Sometimes it was a case of run. So definitely sort of keep that one in mind as well. And like all of us have been rejected from roles, even recently I have as well. So yeah, it does happen to everyone, and it's great to sort of get feedback from it and sort of, yeah, process it in your own way. So I just wanted to add that since we're on the topic. Yeah, I've definitely sort of had my share as well. But I guess onto the roles that I have succeeded on. So in the 1 - 1 to the P on N principle. So currently I'm the principal optimization analyst at Seek, and I lead our experimentation team. So some of the things we do is keeping across many projects at a high level, so lots of different experiments, having a lot of development conversations, talking about our strategy, various sort of leadership activities, planning research, planning and delivering reading groups, and scoping different enhancements to our experimentation platform. Before that, I was at the Commonwealth Bank, so big organisation, and I just wanted to sort of add very siloed. So if you are working at a big organisation, you know, one of the key things there is you will have many different teams across the organisation doing different things in different product areas. So it's quite common with an organisation that big. You can't just have one central team doing things. Just picking up on a previous conversation. And when I was there, you know, I was building relationships with many different stakeholders. Again, some people leadership, probably for the second half of my time there, working with a lot of developers to build the experimentation platform, building different analytics pipelines and various tools to help people really simplify the process of experimentation. So things like power calculators, using sort of the internal data. So I made the jump there from academia. So before that, I was a senior lecturer in statistics at the University of Technology in Sydney. So I was teaching undergraduate and postgraduate classes, you know, up to 700 students. So that's an interesting skill that possibly I'm using more than I thought I would in presenting to other people. Sometimes you just don't know what skills you're going to use and which ones are the most transferable. So to sort of one tip there is just sit down and think, well, how do these skills translate? Because sometimes they translate in really strange ways, but that one has been really useful. Research in experimental design and applied statistics projects, and I was also leading sort of curriculum development within the maths department there. So I've been at SEEK for 4 months. I was at CommBank for 4.5 years, and I was at UTS for about 10 years before that. So much, much earlier, I was an analyst at Memetrics. Interesting thing there was in the interview, I asked how big the company was. I heard 50, but the answer was actually 15. So it was a really small company. I was one of 2 analysts in the company. The other fellow was a chemist. He was very, very good. But definitely in that experience, being sort of certainly the only experimental design person in the company, when you're doing search and landing page optimization and lots of factorial designs, was really interesting. And sort of being within a couple of years of my honours degree, quite confronting in terms of having to be really confident in sort of what you know and what you can learn. Not having too many others who you can bounce ideas. And prior to that, I was at the Australian Bureau of Statistics in their graduate and cadet programs. So why would we want to run experiments? I've got a definition of experiments there, but I don't think I need to go through that. So certainly from a SEEK point of view, really learning what works for candidates and hirers. So the 2 sides of our market, trying to bring candidates and hirers together and find the right matches. So we can continue to improve the experience of both, measuring the impact of our work to justify continued investment. So when you're putting a lot of developers onto certain projects or solving certain problems, you need to be able to justify the benefit of doing that. And experiments are really great for that. Testing hypotheses around how candidates or hirers respond to some different changes. So we might have an idea, we want to go and test that. And also quantifying risks of adverse effects. This one's often a harder sell with many stakeholders, but sometimes having to be the person in the room that says, you know, this might not work, and sort of being the downer on the conversation, but, you know, really highlighting risks. And certainly in a post Royal Commission bank, that was very important, to be highlighting the risks, highlighting the adverse effects, and especially where you're looking at things that can really impact customers' financial well-being. So I like this quote. So this is from Colin McFarland from Netflix, definitely someone who I try and read quite a bit of, but no matter how much you think it's a no-brainer, or how much research you've done, or how many competitors are doing, sometimes, more often than you think, experiment ideas just fail. So I think that's quite a useful thing to keep in mind, and something that I've really got to remind myself quite often when I'm talking to my colleagues. And what sort of stuff could we be looking at in terms of an experimentation team? So there's actually all sorts of stuff, and very sort of technically engaging. So the first one is design of experiments, which is definitely my own personal interest. I haven't, since finishing my PhD, had to construct a fractional factorial design by hand, but I do like that I can do it. It's kind of one of those skills that in a very, very particular situation might be useful, maybe, but I haven't had to use it. Things like being able to estimate well, thinking of ways to reduce variance to shorten how experiments run, different things from Bayesian statistics, so things like multi-arm bandits and sort of adaptive designs, lots of linear and mixed models, things like error control. So the first time I saw that 1 minus 1 minus p to the n, I thought, oh gosh, we're doing multiple comparisons, because I talk about that so many times when people want to throw every single metric at their problem. And finally, one that I'm possibly using a lot more is causal inference. So often quite useful when experiments haven't gone quite the way you would have hoped in terms of implementation, or you have things like self-selection biases. So just a bit around Seek and experimentation at Seek. So the purpose at Seek is to help people live fulfilling and productive working lives and help organisations succeed. So that just really highlights that we've got two different, I guess, sides of the market and two different sets of customers or clients. We have the organisations who are looking for the best person and candidates who are looking for the best role for them. So at Seek, so my team sits within the AI and platform services team. So we look after a lot of the information problems, a lot of the back end of the system. There are other teams that look at experimentation with the look and feel of the website, so the front end. So again, even in a moderately sized company, there is going to be a little bit of siloing. But some of the problems that we look at it on a day-to-day basis include search rankings, job recommendations, personalization, looking at how we present candidates to hirers, improving how we describe jobs and different components in a job application, in a job description. And really, we're using experimentation to learn more about these information problems and also to validate solutions before we deploy. So experimentation has a big role in terms of a last check before something goes into the field. And like many other organizations, we're in the process of building an experimentation platform to really scale the experimentation that we can do. And really the goal there, in my mind, is to really spend more time of our statisticians and our analysts doing the things that statisticians and analysts need to be doing, which is really synthesizing the results and learnings and really communicating with our different stakeholders across the organization so we can get the most out of that data. The final slide I've got is just a few things I've learnt along the way. Your mileage may vary on some of these things, so don't take all of them sort of too deeply. But the first one is always be learning. Go for breadth as well as depth. Certainly, as you get deeper into academia, you do tend to get into a lot of depth as you're sort of moving into industry, looking at breadth and not just the technical stuff as well, looking at sort of project management, presentation, if you do in an agile organization, agile, and there's all sorts of things to look at there. From an analytical point of view, just because you've got a hammer in your hand doesn't mean everything's a nail. So absolutely, you do want to try out, the newest and best tools, but sometimes the best place for that's in a passion project rather than in your day-to-day work. Always think about what is the right method to get the insight that you need from the data that you have. The next one I think is really important, and I think this is my view on sort of that business knowledge. Contextualizing your work in terms of your customer. So for us, that would be our candidates and our hirers, so the end user. So what does a particular insight mean for that customer? And how does a piece of work, an improvement, an optimization benefit the customer? So always thinking about the customer. Where possible, it's great if you're able to measure the value of your contribution. It actually makes influencing and persuading and getting sort of the buy-in from senior people a lot easier if you can sort of demonstrate, well, this is the value. And when you're doing that persuasion piece, understanding your audience, thinking about their motivations, what are they trying to achieve? And tailoring your communications to at least bridge the gap between where you are and where they need to be. And in part of that, investing time being able to explain the things that you do in really simple terms, but really avoiding being patronizing. Like you don't want to be that smartest person in the room. You want to be able to be someone who can just communicate clearly and simply and just go and just help people go, oh, it clicks. And you don't need to look smart to do that. You just need to be able to communicate really clearly. And I think the final one, which is a bit more recent for me, but the management track can actually be really rewarding. So probably over the last 2 or 3 years, I've been doing quite a bit of people management. And like if you are really interested in helping people and developing people, and a lot of the skills that you might have done when you were doing teaching, actually you get to exercise those muscles when you're leading people, which is really cool. And the other thing about it is that you also get to scale the knowledge that you have, because often there's a lot of stuff sitting up here that you really just need to get in practice and get working. And sometimes the most efficient way to do that isn't doing it yourself. It's really helping people and teaching people how to do it and guiding them along the way. So I guess those are the things that I wanted to cover. And back to you, Kevin.
Thank you very much, Steve. I quite like the fact that we are holding a career session and we actually have someone from Seek, like the actual website, help you to get there. That's excellent.
So you know where to go.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe you should be the sponsor next year. Okay, so first, let me close the session and by thanking all our speakers for today. So the next part is probably going to be some sort of panel discussion and throwing questions at our speakers. And
Kevin, do you want to go through the questions in the chat first?
Yeah. So, but I will prioritize the questions to the last 3 speakers, of course, and then open the floor up for all 6 speakers. And then I've tried to leave maybe 10 to 15 minutes towards the end, perhaps just as a free time for everybody to actually have their one-to-one time with our speakers. So I will probably go to Denzel first and ask one of the questions. So this one came from Cameron, and it's a spicy one. So feel free not to answer. Denzel, has the Royal Commission into Banking affected your work as a model risk management analyst? Do you worry about the legal implication of your work? And if you say no, you don't want to answer that, that's fine too.
Now, I am able to answer. Thanks for the question, Cameron. I mean, we might consider it to be a touchy topic, but I'll try to walk around it. There certainly has been a greater attention from the government in terms of the outcomes of our models. I guess the way that we work, so say you were to take out a home loan with Macquarie, the government expects us to hold a certain amount of money to protect ourselves if you go bankrupt. Now, the calculation to do that is the bank is responsible for calculating it themselves. My team reviews the model and then we submit it to the government. So if the model isn't right, but we've approved it, our head's on the line. So there's definitely an increasing amount of scrutiny, especially based on, the changes to lending as some of the outcomes of the Royal Commission as well. But I think in risk management as a whole, there's been a huge impact. So I think the answer is yes. There have been legal implications into the work that I do.
Thanks, and that's actually a really, really reassuring answer, actually.
The next question is
government doing something right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you answered that question okay, so you should be fine. So next question I have is for Steph. So this is actually from me. I quite appreciate your comment regarding, the rejection might came from, whoever that is actually putting out an advertisement to not be exactly sure what you'd be able to contribute to the company, and that's why some job advertisements, sometimes when I see them, looks like 2 PhD to me, roll into one role. But that point aside, I want to ask you this: like, how do you have any tips in dealing with rejections? Because this is COVID, you know, and I know a lot of people in this audience has been applying for jobs and they have not been very successful. So just want to hear your some tips for our young early career statistician into how to deal with this emotionally, at least.
Well, I think, you know, we're all tough enough to handle one or two here and there, right? That's just part and parcel of it. But I think what can be really demoralizing is knowing that you've worked really hard to acquire some great skills and just to be knocked back in a string of rejections. And I think that can feel very different. And so I think that my best advice there is, okay, first of all, get back to your people. Right? Who are the people that see you for who you are? And, you know, grandma's good for that too, but also professionally. Who are the people that have backed you? Okay, so far so good. If you're in your early career, that can feel like, well, I've got no runs on the board, and that makes it really hard. But all you need to get that first step on the ladder is for someone to see your potential, who can understand what it is that you're bringing to the table. If you're coming out of an advanced degree, you need someone who's going to look at you and say, mad skills, I want me some of that. Probably not up to doing PowerPoint documents and Gantt charts. Very smart, could probably handle it, right? You don't want somebody who's going to look at you and go, oh, very difficult to manage with that standard, you'll get the vibe type of thing. That works for a lot of people, not for everyone. If you're coming out of an undergrad degree, you want someone who looks at you and sees, you know, the enthusiasm and the potential and the desire to learn. And that can be really, really hard when you're starting out and you don't have a network. And so number one is, what have you got in your control that you can do to make your opportunities better and to start making change? And so in terms of networking, places like this are awesome. But in COVID and other times, it can also be really difficult if you're isolated. And so what I've found is that reaching out to people, maybe it's LinkedIn, maybe it's Twitter, and asking them, hey, do you have time for a half-hour coffee? I'm interested in getting into X. Some of my struggles are Y, and I'd really value your advice. Now, be prepared for rejection here as well. Kevin, as you would know, I am a terrible replier to of emails. I had to apologize repeatedly this morning for a large number that I had slipped through the noose. It's not about Kevin. It's about time management on my part, which is a little poor. But, you know, try again or try the next person, because I think for a lot of us, we've been there. You know, I wouldn't be sitting in this chair today if Rob Heinemann hadn't reached out. I think it was the 2017 USAR conference, not USAR, Oz Unconf. And on Twitter, he just said, you know, listed a bunch of tagged people and said, you know, Steph Stanley, you should apply. That was a pivotal moment for me that actually changed my entire career, that conference. All of a sudden, I had a network of people like me. In terms of, you know, big career changes, I only sit here because a certain partner at PwC saw potential. Now, I'm a PhD econometrician. He worked heavily in transport. I assumed that he'd hired me to do the two things that econometricians do very well in transport, which is time series forecasting and mode choice modeling. Anyway, so I didn't do any of that for him. I worked for him. He had no idea what it was that an econometrician is supposed to be an expert in. He saw potential and was willing to take a chance. So get out there and find people. Just ask for those half-hour coffees. Set yourself a goal. I'm going to reach out once a week to somebody and set up that half-hour coffee. There are a lot of people who are willing to give you that time because we received it too.
Thank you, Steph. I can resonate quite well with that comment. I mean, I have a half-hour coffee time with my university friends every Tuesday night at 9 or something like that. And that's so helpful. And I think for a lot of the graduates, just so you know, everyone else is also in lockdown. So everyone's dying to talk to some real humans. So to grab their time right now is actually a pretty good chance they got.
There's another aspect to that actually, because it was just a month or two ago that somebody in the R community reached out to me after, having received a lot of rejections. And, we sat down and we had a chat for a half hour. And I think it took me about 5 days to get her an interview with an outfit that I think is going to suit her very well. That's going along positively. Your network is often about people who will be looking out for opportunities for you. Something came across my path. I just kind of went, it took me a good, 3 minutes worth of effort here. So let's, praise my skill there. But that's all it took, because I could see what this person had and I knew what this person needed. And all it was just, hey, here's an email address. And that's all it is. So keep reaching out and keep trying to build that network. And remember, it's not a one-way thing. You will be doing the same for somebody else in 5 or 10 years' time. Okay, so just reach out.
Thank you. The next question is directed at Steve. And it came from Emmy. I don't quite understand this part. So Steve, how does experimentation begin in industry? For example, are there some ethics concerns that come into discussion if it involves customers in the experiment?
Yeah, I think ethics is a really big consideration. One thing to sort of keep in mind is that as you're trying to release something to market, you really don't, like, your prior is that you don't know what's going to happen. You think it might work, but really the point, certainly in some of the sort of release sort of process experimentation, is you want to make sure that it works. So it's certainly more ethical to sort of take the time and check to see whether it works than it would be to just roll something like completely different without checking at all, and possibly watching customer experience or customer outcomes degrade. So that's probably sort of the top part there. But at the same time, you also want to be learning about the customer, and equally, you're not going to try and experiment with something that you don't think is going to improve the customer's experience or the customer outcomes. Because if you're trying to, like, if you're experimenting with something that's going to degrade customer outcomes, then you're going to be stopped well before it gets to the point of an experiment. Because you're not going to sort of get a pitch up necessarily, or at the very least, if it's coming from a very senior person running the experiment, at least puts that to bed. And sometimes it takes an experiment and measuring something to put a senior executive's prior to bed.
Is that where the exec is suggesting something just ridiculous?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I had a request from the transport secretary a couple of days ago, and I'm like, no, I don't want to do that.
Eve, it's like you're living my life, mate.
Yeah.
But yeah, going in with data, it's hard to argue against. People will try, but that's all you can do.
Definitely one of the challenges is when the results of an experiment don't match the prior, you're absolutely likely to do about 3 times as much work to make sure that everything's in line.
I had my fair share of that. You really need those data points to come in to actually squash that sort of desire to just scrape through the experiment or whatever the ideas was. Okay, so I'm trying to open the floor up to all 6 speakers. So if any of the audience wants to ask any question to any one of our 6 speakers, either through the chat or just by turning on your microphone, you can do that. But otherwise, I will move on to the breakout room. So please, if you have any questions, just ask them.
So there was a question from Collis.
Yeah, sure. I just can't see it.
So Collis has a question for Steve. Does Seek buy off-the-shelf experimentation such as Optimizely, or do you build your own?
Good question. I was actually just typing out an answer in the comments. So I I think it's fair to say at the moment we're tossing up the pros and cons of those vendors. Like the thing with working with vendors is that they don't always deliver on what they promise. So actually understanding what they do promise and what the needs of the business are as well. So sometimes it's just not well aligned. So at Seek, I've only been there 4 months. So it's a case of understanding the needs and understanding what the options are. At CBA previously, we actually did a lot of the building within the customer engagement engine system, which was called Pega. So that's not a secret. That's pretty widely publicized. But in that case, it was working with the developers in that particular system to basically build the platforms from scratch, because that was the needs of that particular organization.
Cool. Thanks, Dave. Kevin, are you continuing sharing, or do you want to take over chair for a bit, or how do we want to do this?
You can take over if you want.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So just because you said you're having problems looking at the chat, so I'm just looking through the questions that are passed. So there's a question, a couple of questions about data.table and tidyverse. Mina, who's now left, wanted to know: is it a risk to be using tidyverse in a production setting? And Emmy wants to know why not use dtPlayer to get the best of both worlds?
I think I'll give it a crack. Actually, maybe Steph, I'll let you go first. I'm curious to hear
Okay,
your
so
perspective.
my world is a little bit different. So we have reproducibility requirements that are similar to academia, in the sense that, I can't produce an output or an answer and just go, oh yeah, I don't know what happened in 6 months' time. So this is really important to us. But in terms of risk with, say, tidyverse, well, so if risk by which we mean is, updating and API breaking and so on, if I compare that to the risk of having a team or other people who are not easily able to interrogate the code or who are not experts, then in my purpose, tidyverse is the best option. If I'm working with a team of people who are very, very confident in R and speed is the requirement, then Datatable is an absolutely fantastic option. So it's just a matter of making sure that I understand what the business needs, and then we work together to find that solution. So it's not an either or in my world. Denzel, what about you? Are you in an either or world, or are you a holistic practitioner like myself?
I think it's probably more a holistic approach. I think, well, at least the team that I sit in is, I guess, seeing the benefits of working in Datatable. We see that, I guess, as a learning priority for new starters. So we do ensure that we do spend time with any new starter if they're unfamiliar with the code to, I guess, help them. And however long that might take, that could take for a proficient coder, that might take 2 weeks or a month. For others, it could be 6 months before they, find their feet. But that's something, at least that our team is dedicated to helping the person know. So I think I would agree with you, Steph. Like, it really does depend on the purpose, and it really does depend on how supportive the team that you're entering is. But in terms of dtPlayer, I was laughed at by my team, I think, for suggesting a hybrid between Datatable and tidyverse. So I think that was they're saying, if you're already going halfway there and relying on Datatable, why don't you just go all the way? Yeah. So, a few months later, I've been pushed in that direction.
For context, if it helps anybody, I love tidyverse, but my 2IC is a dedicated Datatable lover. And somehow we make that relationship work. So,
all right, I think so. Just going to the questions in terms of what's been missed. So we've got a couple of questions addressed broadly at the panel now. One from Emmy, one from me. Emmy says, what are the tips for graduates and how to market themselves so they get the interview? What are the keywords they should be using? This sounds very Steph, but I'd love answers from everyone on this too.
I wouldn't say keywords. Like, I think you need to think. I was on a panel 18 months ago to hire someone reporting to me, and it was, I didn't know what I didn't like about CVs until I saw 50 of them. So I think you really have to be careful to think about the person reading the CV. So if you're going to like bang on about something that's completely irrelevant to the job and it's going to take up most of the page, you're going to get put in the bin. Like you need to look at the, if it's a government job, you need to look at the key skills required, and you need to make sure they are popping in your CV. But I'm not so much one for buzzwords, because I saw a lot of students applying who, they talk about using software at uni, but like I know that when I did R, it was like not even half a subject at RMIT. And so like, I could say, yes, I studied R at RMIT, but I knew nothing then. So if you do want to say that you know how to use something, maybe tell me about what project you used it in. Otherwise I see that you've done something at uni, I'm not going to be that impressed. But that's me.
Yeah, and I have to say I totally agree. I had to interview for some positions, and it wasn't actually about how much they knew or like the things that they were talking about. It was more, for example, the way in which they were talking about the problem, how they were approaching, I don't know, the sort of context that we were trying to solve. And also, like, if you think that you're, of course you might be really good in one language or maybe less in one other one, and maybe just tell that you don't know something, and it's probably better than pretending that you know something when instead you're not really that you're not really that strong in that area. So I would say be honest, and try to think more how you can try to think more about your thinking skills, and also read well the role, and try to get well what the role needs and what's actually wanted for the job.
Yeah, I think that particularly new graduates are up against it in the sense that we have an industry that is very, very skills focused. And you have got to have machine learning skills, but not econometric skills. And you've got to be able to do A/B testing, but gosh, statistics. And so that can make it really difficult to know where to land your CV. And on the one hand, you risk coming across like you're just into buzzwords and don't really know what's going on. Or on the other hand, apparently you're not qualified for this particular area to get through the algorithm. And so you're in a really tough place. So I think you've got two strategies potentially. One is you can increase the N and apply for everything, with a very high level resume that's talking to common skills and all the rest of it. And maybe that is got some buzzwords in it, where you're using machine learning instead of forecasting, or you're using experimental design brackets A/B statistics. Your other option is to say, here's my top 10 places I really want to work. And then go out on LinkedIn and find the most junior person you can find in that organization working in the area you want to be working in. So say you want to work in the data science division at SEEK. Steve, what would be the lowest sort of data analyst role in your world?
So an associate.
Yeah, go and find the associate or the graduate analyst, reach out to them on LinkedIn and say, would you be open for a half-hour cup of coffee? I'd really like to work with your team, and I'd love to hear about what it's like. Steve, does your organization have a recruitment bonus by any chance?
They do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Organizations have a recruitment bonus. A recruitment bonus is when an employee passes on a CV or a lead about a potential hire into the HR organization. So go find your grad analysts and your associates at the places you want to work, reach out to them, find out what skills are, really needed. It's a great recon mission too. I ask sometimes, how do you treat junior analysts that make a mistake? And when the answer comes back, waterboarding, run hard. But how a team will treat you when you're learning and you make a mistake is a big indication of whether or not you want to be there. And so go find these junior analysts and these grad analysts and so on LinkedIn. Reach out for 20 coffees. I bet you they will be flattered. Find out where the good engagement and the good cultures are. Find out what it is that they're doing. Listen to what they're saying and then apply for their programs. Ideally, can I send you my CV? They might get it. It's a few $1,000 after tax even, isn't it, Steve? Denzel, similar at Macquarie? Recruitment bonus if you manage to bring anybody in?
Yes, actually, we are desperately looking for people in my area, if anyone's interested. But yes, it is huge. I think connecting to people, as you said before, instead of using LinkedIn or anything like that is amazing, you know.
So don't
you don't ever have to stop at the first person that you ask.
Yeah, and the number of times, so you also get a reputation in your organization as someone who can source talent. I haven't been at PwC for a year. I got a call from somebody I don't even know there saying, I heard you were the person to find people who can, program in R. We've got a bit of a situation. We need some people stat. Like, sure thing, no problem. And so, I gave them 3 different individuals' names in a couple of different outfits, just because I knew that these people were indie in the industry, right? Now, sure, I didn't get anything from that one. There wasn't a recruitment bonus, but all of a sudden the people that have been talking to me for the last 6 months got their names put in the hat, right? Because someone knew that they were there. So reach out. Recruitment bonuses are a thing, less so at the graduate level, but do it anyway. Find out about these people, go talk to them.
And unfortunately not in government. I don't get any money for referring people.
Get taken out to coffee in government, can you?
So just so you know, like if any of our speakers gets application through them after tonight, the society takes about 50% cut. No pressure.
Honestly, that's not a bad strategy. But yeah, I guess for me, the moral of the story is always reach out. Okay, it's not one-sided. You aren't asking for anything that you wouldn't give back.
And a couple of weeks ago, I did provide a referral to a colleague of mine. And one of the nice things in that referral is there's also a box that I needed to fill in to explain why I thought that person was good for the role.
Yep.
So that was really helpful.
Yeah.
Because luckily I had managed this person before and could sing their praises.
Yeah, a couple of people got hired at Accenture in the last 6 months because I was just able to say, oh, you're doing this? Oh, I'm not interested, but go talk to this person here because they've done X, Y, Z. And it just cuts through a lot of crap. So.
And I mean, my own experience has been those sorts of leads have been way more successful than cold calling. Like my own personal strike rate on cold calling is really low.
Terrible.
So
I've only ever gotten one job from cold calling, and if I made an application on Seek. I made an application on Seek. It was the only application I ever saw for a principal econometrician.
You got it. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Great algorithms.
All of my rejections were on LinkedIn. So.
These are really interesting answers, and I have to say also, goes well with my experience. Almost every job I've got has come through knowing someone, as opposed to just randomly applying for a job on Seek. So we're technically out of time already, but we're all having a lot of fun. So I'm going to push my luck and see if the panel want to take one more question. Is that So this is one from me and seconded by Danyan. So there's a few answers in the chat already, but for somebody interested in doing an industry job, would doing a PhD in statistics be worthwhile, or would the equivalent time be better spent career-wise upskilling while working?
Yep. I mean, I'm happy to say something as I'm just fresh out of PhD. So if you're really just keen to go for an industry position out of your master, probably just go for it. I mean, if you're, I don't know, it's sort of like just go for the job. Maybe, as you know, Steph and I will say, talk to people that are in similar position, try to find out what you need and upskill yourself. Maybe you just do a course on Coursera or some other courses to upskill on some topics, but I would just say just go for it. Of course, like it's always, you know, it can be fun to do a PhD. It's hard if you're really passionate and you want to spend some more time just doing your own project. You want to be the owner of it. You want to build that sort of skills. Also, go for it. And as I said in my answer, I got the two places that I am, that they were actually asking for a PhD, or they wanted someone that also maybe had a PhD in statistics. So for me, that was good, but I don't think that it's necessary in all positions. So maybe have a think with yourself. What do you want to do?
It would depend a lot on the job, because the kind of areas that I'm working in, you know, there wouldn't be a lot that would require a PhD, whereas, you know, there might be some areas of the Bureau of Stats, or, you know, where you would need a lot of experience.
Yeah.
The only role I've ever been in where a PhD probably is a useful thing.
And I'm also anti-PhD because my sister is doing one, so don't listen to what I say.
I always tell people that any organisation only needs one person like me. You only need one person in the entire organisation that can derive the Dickey-Fuller distribution or whatever. But you need about 50 to 100 people for every one of me just to keep this place going. You know, and they're often providing a lot more value than the Dickey-Fuller distribution. They do other things too. But, you know, if you think about where the needs are, it's not really around PhDs. Yeah, they're great, don't get me wrong, but they are not a necessary requirement.
Yeah,
I'll jump in and agree with that. It's definitely not necessary. I think some of the best advice I got early on that I completely ignored was that an honours degree is fantastic because you get that project that can demonstrate the skills and the sort of thinking about a longer term project than an assignment. A master's is pretty good, but then a PhD, like for the amount of time and effort you put into it, it's like at least 3 years of your life that you're putting aside to do a PhD. You're not going to get that back in industry, so you have to have a different motivation to do it.
Yeah. And then you're justifying yourself that you're capable of.
But also think of all the money you could be earning during that time. Like
that's really every time I start sort of thinking about that.
Yeah.
Having said that, I don't regret a step of that. But you know, if I decided that my endpoint was industry and I wanted to take the direct route, I wouldn't have done a PhD.
Yeah.
But I was lucky to get a brilliant supervisor who I just loved working with. So
I think there are a lot of us with PhDs out here who never meant to be here. I was going to be an academic only working in theoretical data. So I think, you know, we're also in a place where this is a rapidly growing area. And right now there's a bit of a fetishization, is that even a word? There's a fetish for PhDs out there. And this idea that on the one hand, you got to have a PhD to do technical work, but on the other hand, a PhD is not a good hire because they're too technical. So, you know, it's Schrodinger's PhD. It's not too technical, or you're not doing stuff without it.
You should drop out of your PhD program halfway. That's the
There's a specific day, but then you're not reliable. So, you know, and I think, you know, what we have to be aware of is that these are market failures and information failures. They're not you failures. PhDs can have great careers out in industry. Steve, I'm not going to ask how much you're earning, but I'm not on your typical single mum wage, shall we say, and really happy to be here. but also I had to learn a lot of skills out here, but I wouldn't have done that without people who were prepared to back me. And that means as a solo parent, I can take care of my kids on my own. And one day we get to go on holiday, and it's amazing.
Holidays and weekends and evenings. Like, I just have to so agree with Anna at the beginning. Like, I was working 12-hour days just to keep up with the KPIs in academia.
There's some other academia that I wasn't involved in. Like, I admittedly left after my PhD, but yeah, that was never my experience.
Yeah. If
Maybe
it was
previous century.
If it was just teaching and research, I would have loved, like, that was my bag. Like,
Yeah.
If you want to get put off academia, just work for Swinburne. Sorted me out.
Yeah.
We'll cut a bit out for the eventual upload of the recording, just so. Because we don't burn any bridges as a society.
You said Maths and Stats was hiring for a head of school not long ago. And I threatened John Omerod, who's a professor of statistics in the school, that I would apply for it. And my value proposition would be that I'm not an academic. I will be an umbrella where things that rain down are not rain between the rest of the school, and everybody else can get on with the research and the teaching, and I will take care of the rest of it. That was going to be my
That's a job description of a phenomenal manager generally, I think, is that you reduce the bullshit of the team you're managing has to deal with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, unfortunately my research program, which is to say none of it doesn't quite. So.
If those of you in academia want something that's really triggering, watch The Chair on Netflix with Sandra Oh. It's and even if you're not an academic, it's very good watching.
Yeah. The other one that I've been watching lately and going is Utopia. If anyone's worked in government, then
I can't watch it. I cannot watch it. It is like we thought there were spies. Like, that's how accurate it is.
You're never going to be able to go to a Kitty Flanagan show again.
Yes.
It's exactly what happens in government. Yeah.
Yeah, after hearing all of this, I feel like I have the weird unicorn position working at a university with good work-life balance, technically being academic staff and not having a PhD.
Nailed it.
But they would pay you more if you had a PhD, though, wouldn't they?
They would. I mean, they would pay me more if I was working in industry as well. Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's really fun, and I kind of want to keep on hearing it, but I'm also very conscious about the fact that we've gone over time. So thank you very much to all the speakers for sharing your generous advice and also time as well. It's been quite interesting and also really great to hear from all of you. So I want to bring into closing today's event. And also maybe I should come in to step into, because there was a lot of academia bashing just then. I gotta balance it out because there's no one that's stepping up at the
Sorry.
Well, it's not that bad, okay, PhD. And yes, maybe you lose a bit of your weekend here and not, but it is also your passion when it comes to research and teaching as well. So I
wonder if we need to bring people back. I'll come in with my Gantt charts and some great PowerPoint back. I'm sure that will solve everything.
Yes. Look, I think at the very end of the day, it will be up to people what they want to do. So I think it's okay either way.
So if you're sounding like the management consultant that the VC brings in to reorganize everyone.
XPWC.
I just should quickly mention one thing, which is we actually organized some small gifts for our speakers, but then I'll send that in a separate email to you guys. So thank you for your efforts tonight.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun. And remember to reach out for those half-hour online coffees. We might be slow to respond, but these are just gifts that were given to us.
Absolutely.
5 or 10 years ago. And you'll do the same.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Everyone,
have a good night.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.